Father Mark sets a very high bar for what he expects in liturgical celebrations. So he told me that when I'm finished with my homily in English, I need to repeat the whole thing in Polish. I'm afraid I won't be able to live up to that high bar that Mark would like to see for this assembly. On Holy Thursday, we take a look at John's Gospel, which gives us an extremely high bar of how we're supposed to live the Christian life. It's impossible. It's as if the Gospel is asking us to do something we simply cannot do. And as I detail it for you, you'll see, if we're honest with ourselves, who can do this? We really can't. And the reason we have this gospel on the night that we're talking about the Eucharist is not because it tells the story of Jesus taking the bread and the cup, but because it's out of John's gospel where it tries to give us the meaning of the Eucharist. And the meaning of the Eucharist for John is to go into deeper and deeper and deeper levels of communion, of loving. And the further down you go, as I hope to be able to detail for you, it's obvious it's impossible. You just can't do it. So first of all, Jesus is washing the feet of his disciples. He's taking on the form of a slave or a servant in a world, you can decide whether it's similar to our own, where the strong take advantage of the weak. Those who have all the privilege act as if those on the margins can be completely ignored. So why would Jesus, who has all this privilege and all this strength, why would he instead invert the whole thing? Instead of having himself be served, why is he serving them? That's the first indication to his disciples. And the gospel says explicitly, I'm modeling something for you here. I realize my time is limited. John says he will love them to the end. And then he puts in the mouth of Jesus, and I am doing this so you will do this. So maybe they get to the point where they can say, okay, we're not supposed to dominate other people. Okay, maybe I can sort of get there. All right. But then we see whose feet Jesus is washing. He's washing the feet of Peter, and the text tells us that it's already clear inside of Jesus that Peter is going to betray him. Now, how difficult is it for you when you know that someone you're very close to, someone you've invested a lot of time in, someone you've established a really good relationship with, and you find out that they are going to totally disown you? That if it's a choice between their rear end and yours, it's going to be yours. They're going to save theirs. And that's exactly what Peter does. Jesus knows he's going to do it, and he loves him anyway. Why? Wouldn't you want to draw the line and say, I can't do that? Now, I could love him up to that point when I know he's going to betray me or he's going to disown me. Then I draw the line. Obviously, I'm not expected to keep loving him then, right? Wrong. John tells us that Jesus is setting an extremely high bar, that even when someone has disowned you, you continue to love them. So we just look at that and we go, wow, wow. If we're the newbies on the team and we see the veteran doing that, we just go, how's he do that? How's he do that? I don't know. I don't think I can play in this league. That's awesome. But Jesus isn't finished. He goes up to Judas. And the text tells us he already understands that Judas is not only going to disown him, he would rather have 30 pieces of silver than have Jesus be alive. He would be happy to take money and give up his relationship with Jesus So you would think, okay, now this must be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Obviously, Jesus can't love him. No, Jesus washes his feet too. Who can do this? Can you do that? I just don't know how we could possibly do that. Paul was stupefied by this. When he wrote, maybe 50 years before, or more before John's gospel was written, he says, "This stupefies me." He said, "I could see dying for a good person. I could see if you really thought somebody was awesome, you might jump in front of a bus for them. But for a jerk? For somebody you've decided is just a scumbag? Would you really give up your life?" Paul says, this just mystifies me. This proves how deep God's love is, that Christ died for us while we were still sinners. This just mystified the early church, and no wonder Jesus was considered the bar. He's the guy. He can do this. This is awesome. And what the text is telling us is if we want a church that's really full of communion, where people actually get along with each other, the only way is if we follow in the footsteps of the Master and try to do what he did. Whew. Christian Amanpour was doing some interviewing about the civil war in Rwanda 20 years ago. And she ran across a woman by the name of Iphigenia. She was a Tutsi. And Iphigenia saw her husband and her 5 children clubbed and hacked to death by the Hutus, including one who was her neighbor. Her neighbor. Her neighbor. After he was in jail for 7 years, he threw himself on the mercy of the tribal court and wanted the opportunity to express his apology to Iphigenia. And the court granted his request to do this, and she widened her heart, and she accepted the apology of this man who had hacked to death her husband and her 5 children. Christian Amanpour learned that shortly after that, Iphigenia went to the wife of the man who did this and said, "I am a master weaver. You need to be able to make money for your family. I would like to teach you how to weave baskets." And she did. She taught her how to weave baskets. Then they became friends as they worked together and business partners. The wife of the man who had hacked her husband and her 5 children was now a friend of hers as her heart continued to expand and do the impossible. When Christian Amanpour went to interview her in her home, Iphigenia was introducing Christian to all of the people who were at the table. And to Christian's surprise, the man himself who had hacked her husband and her 5 children was sitting there at the table, and Iphigenia was serving him a meal. And Christiane got her aside by herself, and she said, "How do you do this? How are you able to forgive this man for what he has done?" And she said, "I'm a Christian, and I pray a lot." Brothers and sisters, it's impossible. I told you ahead of time. You can't say I didn't warn you. This is impossible. But this is how the Master loves. And this is the bar that's been set for us at the Eucharist. And a truth about the Eucharist that I want to end on is that the good news is we're not alone in trying to do the impossible. That's what Iphigenia meant when she said, "I pray a lot." When we gather around the table at the Eucharist, we are not alone. There is a mysterious guest. There is a mysterious guest who wants to wash our feet, who wants to take care of us despite what we have done, who wants to love us to the place where we're able to walk out, to just try to move in that direction, to just keep walking in that direction, knowing we're probably not going to be able to do it to the standard of Jesus, although every once in a while there's an Iphigenia who's able to pull it off. But it's the call that is happening to each of us to at least move in that direction. And when we gather for the Eucharist, someone is sourcing us to be able to do the impossible so that we don't have to try to do it alone. Amen?